Good afternoon, everybody. A very warm welcome to this webinar on the topic of the meaning of the EU's strategic partnership with Central Asia. And we're delighted to be joined today by Ambassador Eduards Stiprais, who I'll introduce in a moment. My name is Barry Colfer. I'm the Director of Research at the Institute of International European Affairs here in Dublin, and I'm very happy that you've joined us. This discussion today is part of a new body of work that we're undertaking under the auspices of our SERVE grant, so from the European Commission that funds a certain part of our work, where we're trying to explore the EU's global gateway and its strategic partnerships with different parts of the world. So really happy for the next hour to spend a little bit of time in the very interesting part of the world that is Central Asia. I mentioned that we're delighted to be joined by Ambassador Stiprais, who is the EU Special Representative for Central Asia. He's joining us from Brussels. Very warm welcome. I only discovered this ambassador this morning when I was told by Heather Burke, a researcher here who's organized this discussion, that it's been 10 years since you spoke to us previously. Not sure if you recall that, but it was remiss of me not to note that previously. So I'm very happy to welcome you back to the Institute, albeit virtually. So as ever, those on the call will know Ambassador Stiprais will speak to us on the topic of the new EU Central Asia strategic partnership that's been agreed between the EU and the 5 Central Asian countries at a summit in April of this year. He'll speak for about 20 minutes or so, and then we'll get into Q&A with the audience and indeed myself. As ever, you'll be able to join the discussion using the Q&A function on Zoom, which I encourage you to do. And do please pop in questions for the ambassador as they occur to you. As ever, a reminder that the presentation and Q&A today are both on the record. I'm going to now formally introduce Ambassador Stiprais before handing over to him. Ambassador Eduards Stiprais joined the Latvian diplomatic service in 1993. He has served in a variety of positions, including as head of EU delegation in Uzbekistan from 2016 to 2020, as the permanent representative of Latvia to the EU, and as the ambassador of the Republic of Latvia to the UK, as well as to France. Ambassador Stiprais assumed his role as EU Special Representative for Central Asia in March of 2025, so congratulations on this new appointment. Throughout his career, Ambassador Stiprais received several national and foreign awards and decorations. He's contributed to numerous publications on matters of European integration and the wider international agenda, and I'm very happy that he's also contributing to our discussion here in Ireland regarding EU Central Asian relations. So once again, Ambassador, thanks for being with us, and I hand you the floor.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Barry, and good afternoon, everybody. Yes, indeed, I spoke last time 10 years ago. I must say that probably that was a little bit more should I say, pleasant event, because afterwards I had an opportunity just to walk around Dublin, including some after party in the Temple Bar. So, but coming back to the very topic of our today's discussion, and this is the strategic partnership between the European Union and Central Asia, which was indeed announced just a couple of months ago, so 4th of April in Samarkand during actually the first ever EU and Central Asia, sort of the proper summit, where we had 5 leaders of Central Asian countries together with both presidents from Brussels, the president of the European Council and the president of the European Commission, present and working together as one team, which probably those of you who is following EU affairs might probably notice that during previous 5 years, not always was the case for various reasons. So, and it's why also I think that the very fact that summit took place was already a success, because actually to synchronize calendars of both EU presidents, but also with the 5 presidents of, actually, I mean, we are treating them as a region, as a sort of the entity, which for the moment Central Asia is not. I mean, those are 5 sovereign countries who also need to coordinate their efforts in a very informal way up till now. So the summit took place and the strategic partnership was announced. And what does it actually entail? So focus on common work in developing sustainable transport corridors between Central Asia and Europe. Why this is important? This is important because if we work in any other area of cooperation, and if there is no connection, if there is no connectivity between that region and Europe, I mean, in fact, I mean, it makes the whole exercise very much pointless. For example, if we move into another priority area, which was highlighted by the summit, and that's cooperation on critical raw materials. So we need to extract them, we need to refine them, we need to bring them to our market. So the last thing really involves necessity to bring them either across Russia, which is currently probably not the most feasible of all transport connections. Another possibility is to do it through the nearest for Central Asians ocean ports, which would be on the Arabian Sea, either Pakistani or Iranian, which is again, I mean, first and foremost, this is the lack of infrastructure across Afghanistan. And this is also a very volatile security situation related to Iran currently. So up till now, the port of Bandar Abbas was one of the major outlets, ocean outlets for the Central Asians. And it was closed now for several weeks following hostilities between Israel and Iran. So we are also speaking about close cooperation on green transition. We are speaking about the digital connectivity. Again, something which is extremely important also in assisting countries of the region to overcome the digital divide. So this is, I mean, all small bricks, and this is a non-exclusive list of activities that we can carry, and we are already carrying out with the countries of the region. And of course, this is not the beginning. This is rather a sort of indeed the summit point to which we were climbing over quite a long time, gradually building up our relations with the countries of the region. So those are countries who gained their independence in their current borders. I mean, historically, there were states in the region. I mean, this is the cradle of ancient civilization, probably akin to Mesopotamia or the ancient Egypt. This area between two rivers, Amudarya and Sirdarya rivers, once even conquered by the Alexander the Great. So, but in their current borders, they gained their independence following the collapse of the Soviet Union. So we started to establish diplomatic relations with those countries at the beginning of 1990s. We followed that with concluding the so-called first stage or a first generation partnership and cooperation agreements, again, mid-1990s. So we came to our need to define our strategy towards the Central Asia at the beginning of 2000s. So discussions started, led by that time Germany as a leading country. And it was during the German presidency of the Council of the European Union in 2007 that the first EU strategy was adopted, which had its further sort of the should I say, reincarnations on or upgrades, regular upgrades all the way till 2019, when the latest strategy was adopted, which includes and defines for the moment 3 priority areas for our cooperation, which is resilience, which is prosperity, and which is regional cooperation. Actually, bringing countries of Central Asia much closer together. And why this point appeared and was so prominent, that unfortunately, until late 2016, there was almost no cooperation between the countries of the region, which was caused very much by the interpersonal relations of some leaders of those countries, who, for various reasons, couldn't get along. Namely, that was the late president of Uzbekistan, Islam Karimov, who actually saw that some of his neighbors were trying somehow profiteer at, at their expense. So it was, I would say, with the change of guard in Uzbekistan, that was a new dawn for regional cooperation in Central Asia. And if before, for example, the intra-regional trade was almost non-existent, now it's growing exponentially. Borders are opened, movement of people, many common programs, especially of the areas of common interest, for example, as water management, which until then was rather could be considered as a cause for the conflict, a sort of the casus belli. I mean, back in years like 2011, 12, the leadership of Uzbekistan threatened the neighbors in Tajikistan, I mean, to launch a military invasion if they proceed with building of that huge Ragun hydropower plant, the dam. So now this is turning towards cooperation, towards sort of the win-win approach. Also, after the COVID, comparatively recently, in 2023, foreign ministers, 27 ministers of the EU member states, together with the 5 ministers of the Central Asian countries, adopted a joint roadmap, actually on implementing this strategy, where we have 5 key areas of cooperation, including 79 action points. I wouldn't mention all the action points, it will take too much time. So, but those key areas, it's a political dialogue. And one example is last week in Dushanbe, we had the high-level security and political dialogue with 5 Central Asian countries, which was chaired by the Deputy Secretary General of the External Action Service, Olaf Skog. We're speaking about economic ties, about the nexus between energy, climate, and connectivity, and our contribution as a Team Europe to that. It's security cooperation, extremely important one, including, again, last week we had for the first time joint meeting between the EU institutions and 5 Central Asian countries on the counterterrorism, which is, of course, extremely sensitive topic for everybody. And I must say that meeting was very successful because the exchange of opinions, exchange of information was very frank. And finally, people-to-people contacts, which includes, of course, the cultural exchange, which includes extremely important area of cooperation in the area of education, including participation of the Central Asian countries in Erasmus Plus program, which is, I mean, generally one of the greatest successes of the European integration that we have. So this is areas where we are working. So, and of course, if we're speaking about the practical tools include existing agreements, either partnership cooperation agreement, or in case of two countries with whom we already signed enhanced partnership and cooperation agreements, there are institutions which are established within those treaties, like cooperation councils, cooperation committees, subcommittees discussing the panoply of issues of mutual interest. And of course, we must mention that our trade, bilateral trade, is growing. So last year, the trade turnover reached 54.2 billion euros, which is increase over previous years. So we are the second trading partner for the region. The first is obviously China, as their closest neighbor and, should I say, the powerhouse of manufacturing for the moment. The third largest trading partner for them is still Russian Federation. Again, due to the geographic proximity and to the fact that 2 out of 5 Central Asian countries are members of Eurasian Economic Union, together with Russia, Belarus, and Armenia. So, European Union remains the largest bilateral donor in Central Asia, providing crucial aid in areas related to reforms of the governance, support to the reform of the agricultural sector and water sector, which is water management is probably one of the most important things in the region. As somebody who traveled extensively across the region, I can tell you probably nowhere else, as in Central Asia, you can visibly see the difference between areas where the water is available and where it's not, between life and death, in the most direct, should I say, terms. So, and of course, if we speak about the trade turnover, it's mostly we are importing hydrocarbons, some other raw materials, some refined metals. So yeah, mostly for the moment, we are sourcing raw materials for our industries. And of course, one of the largest part of our exports to the region, those are machinery and tools. So we are satisfying growing, should I say, hunger of those economies for the latest technologies. Again, they are absolutely they desperately want to bridge that development gap. And they are very, very serious about it. So the transfer of knowledge, the transfer of technologies, this is an absolute priority on the part of the Central Asian countries. And of course, if we speak about the Central Asia, why we need them, I mean, it's also geopolitical. All 5 countries, they are in a rather peculiar position, while being either entirely or mostly situated in Asia geographically. There is a tiny part of Kazakhstan which geographically falls still within the Europe. I mean, situation probably similar to Turkey. They are part of our security architecture. All 5 countries are participating states of the OSCE. All 5 countries are rather active members of the United Nations and some of their constituent organizations. So, and in most cases, I would say probably in almost entirety of cases, they would vote according to the same lines as we do. They are sharing basic principles, which are enshrined both in the UN Charter and in the Helsinki Final Act. So yes, the current situation, the Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, puts them in a very precarious position. Because of their dependencies, including economic dependencies, but in some cases also security dependencies on Russia, they are probably not ready to vote condemning Russia. But frankly speaking, they are not voting to support Russia either. So, yes, we may see them walking out of the room during the votes or abstain, which, bearing in mind their current situation and their exposure, is probably the best they can do to show their sort of the principled position. So this is something. In a way, there is potential for us to develop those relations and support this sort of the like-mindedness in those countries. And of course, we have common interests. We are cooperating internationally on such topics as climate and water in terms of the climate change, especially adaptation to the climate change. I mean, those countries which are probably facing enormous amount of challenges, and they have full understanding of, I mean, sort of the causes of the current situation. So, I mean, we cooperated on UN Water Conference. I mean, the next one will also looking at those. Recently, there was a high-level UN conference on the protection of glaciers organized in Tajikistan. So this is something which is where we can work together, and where probably we can even learn from countries of Central Asia. I mean, frankly speaking, if we speak about the drought-resistant agriculture, they probably have better experience than our own farmers in south of France or in Spain, which are now experiencing probably the third year in a row extremely harsh climate conditions. So this is something which is of interest us. And of course, we are speaking about cooperation in areas related to security. Region is bordering on Afghanistan, which unfortunately, despite its relative stability, remains the source of various threats, of migratory flows, trafficking of drugs, trafficking of weapons, spread of extremist ideologies, despite the fact that probably Taliban is not the best friend of the Daesh, but somehow the remnants of Daesh, they found their sanctuary in the northern Afghanistan and are posing direct threat to Central Asian countries just across the border. And we are speaking about the spread of radical ideologies across the region, specifically when we are speaking about the Islamic extremism. So far, countries of the region were quite successful in containing it, in battling it. And there are things or two we can learn from them, but they also need our support, especially in those areas where they need their governments actually to fulfill their part of the social contract with their population. Because if the government fails and the social economic conditions deteriorate in those countries, this is going to provide very fertile ground for further radicalization. I mean, because those guys are coming and offering very simple, if not simplistic, answers to very, very complex questions. asked by the people. So this is another area which is extremely important for us. It's also for us a possibility to show also to some extremist elements, both in the EU member states, but also in our even closer neighborhood, that actually Islam and modernity are fully compatible. And here, historically, if we look, probably nobody better than countries of Central Asia have a say in this, because back in the Middle Ages, the area of Khorasan, which encompasses most of the Central Asia and parts of Afghanistan, was it hosted the most prominent Islamic scholars of the time, like, for example, al-Bukhari, who compiled the second most sacred book in Islam. So that was actually the hadiths on the life of the Prophet. And actually, at the same time, that was the time of enormous development of Islamic science. We speak about Abu ibn Sina, about al-Khwarizmi, as late as Ulugh Bek and others. So advancements of medicine, of mathematics, astronomy, just other areas as well. So this is something this is enormous heritage on which to build and to propose the notion of enlightened Islam as alternative to some Salafist strains and their teaching. So this very much brings us together. I probably finish here. I would probably need to also to mention another thing which is very close to our hearts, and this is, of course, that in our dialogue with the countries of Central Asia, we are stressing very much that in order to provide necessary resilience to their societies, which includes economic resilience, but also societal resilience in a wider sense, it's extremely important to have functioning democratic institutions, rule of law, observation of rule of law, efficient judiciary, and of course, last but not least, human rights, observation of universal human rights, individual rights, rights of expression, and things like that. And this, of course, it's sometimes difficult dialogue. Sometimes understanding and perception of the right balance between the collective interest and individual rights, I must say, probably differs to various degrees from one country to another. But at least there is a willingness to engage in this dialogue and to seek a sort of the good equilibrium. So with this, I probably finish for the moment, and I'm open to all possible questions and clarifications on my side. Yeah.